make sure you knock that first one out of the ballpark. Nobody's good at every single thing.
So you gave me two things. What can you do better than anyone else? And what can you bring to the table that's better than your competitors? A lot of the people in those countries reach out to me and said, Eric, I see this company here. How do I begin to work with them? Is that something that you do, or is that something that someone else does? How do you go find people there to help service those contracts locally?
When I get a request from a company that is not US based, I forward them over to our procurement manager, that email. I only deal with small businesses, and they can be a small business overseas, but if they're not a US based company, they don't have an office back here, then they're not,
under your purview.
They're not a small business under the definition of FAR. So, and there's a lot of rules for procuring things overseas that we have to follow. There's in the ITAR and the Buy American Act, and there's just all kinds of things. So I usually send those over to our procurement director and let them decide if they need, support from another company overseas.
Okay. No, but again, there's a pathway, right? So if I'm someone that's overseas and I'm like, hey, I'm in Guam or I'm in Europe, right? And again, having done their research, right? That way, that's a pathway for them, because maybe they don't know who's in charge of the program over there.
Right. But if they are a small business that is a U.S. company that does work OCONUS, we always like to hear from those.
Okay.
It's small businesses that know how to work overseas and understand overseas labor laws and the different rules for shipping things, across the oceans. Those are few and always of interest.
Okay. All right. Excellent. No, I like that. I appreciate that. No, that's great. Tell me, what other things, again, experiences that you've had where, like I said, a small business might have, and again, you've shared a lot thus far, so I really appreciate that. But a small business that comes to you and maybe, like you said, they weren't clear about like their sweet spot, or they weren't clear about their core competencies. What would you tell those folks? And so again, this is a different kind of question, because I'm trying to help people that are listening to improve on their delivery, on their message, right? Because
one of the things I tell companies all the time is no company is expert at everything. So, and here's a perfect example. IT. Companies come up to me all the time and they say, I'm an IT company. And I'll say, well, what are your core competencies? What is your company, specialize in? Everything, IT. I'm like, you can't. you just can't.
Right.
And it's very hard for me to sell that company, into our group when they've just promised to be good at everything. Nobody's good at every single thing.
Right.
So what is it that your company does better than anybody else? Is it data analytics? Is it working in the cloud? Is it the help desk? It doesn't have to be one thing, but it can't be everything, because no company is good at every single thing. So it's to get that foot in the door, you have to tell them, what is it about your company that is, your core competency? What is it you can bring to the table that's better than all your competitors?
Well, so you gave me two things. What can you do better than anyone else? And what can you bring to the table that's better than your competitors? So those are great questions for people to ask themselves, because I agree with you. I've had the same experience with IT people that I've asked them, what do you do? They say, oh, I can do it all. I'm like, okay, that doesn't really help me. So I have had that same experience with IT folks. And they're like, oh, well, tell me what you have, and then we can do that. Is that something like
I get that a lot.
Right?
Sometimes I'll ask them to tell me about some of the contracts that they have. That sometimes helps me to figure out where they might fit.
Okay. Tell me about the contracts you have.
And that's another thing I tell people. Actually, for the Florida 8A Alliance a few years ago, I did a talk on what to do after you win. And what I tell companies is, if you get your foot in the door, if you're a small business and you get that first contract, make sure you knock that first one out of the ballpark.
Right.
Make absolutely sure you understand what you're bidding on, and then make sure you're a success, because then you'll get asked back.
I like it.
People like to do business with companies that they're familiar with. So, once we get you in that door, and the small business people get you in there and you get that opportunity, make sure that the folks that are the technical people think, God, that company was so good. Let's use them again.
Right. Okay. So let's stick with that topic. Where are some of the areas that you've seen small businesses not knock it out the park? Or where there's some areas that we've let you down?
Not reading the requirements of the contract. Read every inch of that contract. And if you don't understand something, make sure that you ask the question before you sign the contract. Here's, for one example, a number of years ago now, they call it construction wage hour now, but it was called Davis-Bacon. And Davis-Bacon contracts require weekly payrolls. So we had asked the small business, do you need weekly payments? Do you need quick prompt pay, quicker than monthly? No, I don't need it. I said, okay. I said, but don't forget, you have all these requirements. We have to have the weekly payroll turned in, and because we have to turn it into the government, and they have to review it before they will, pay the invoice on this. The following week, I get an invoice. I'm like, what is this? Well, I need a quicker pay. Okay, I didn't go negotiate with my customer for us to be able to get quicker pay, but okay, we're going to help you out. But make sure you get that payroll in by Tuesday so that we can, get it reviewed into the government by Thursday so that we can pay you, because the government has to sign off. The contracting officer has to say yes. Thursday comes and goes, no payroll. Friday, they come looking for their check. I can't pay you. You didn't turn in the payroll.
Right.
It's a law. I didn't make this stuff up.
Right.
Our government customer was quite adamant about, we had to turn in the weekly payroll and some other deliverables that they had. And I'm not going to identify the customer because
of course, no.
If I told you which customer it was, you'd know all the reports that had to go in. And before I know it, I get a call from the contracting officer. The small business had gone to their local congressperson, who had called the base commander, who had called the head of contracts, who had called my contracting officer, who called me. And it all could have been avoided if they'd read every piece of that contract, asked questions, and then worked with us. We were trying really hard to make them successful. And they just were not following what was the regulations and the rules that they had to follow.